All right. Well, welcome everybody to our WIT series seminar. This one we're going to be focusing on global surgery, and we have just an incredible panel with us today. So I'm very excited to introduce to you panelists that I think will enlighten you in how to have a successful career in academic global surgery. The specifics here we're going to focus on is trauma. But in case we have some stragglers who are not trauma types, I think you can really apply this more broadly. So I also want this to be somewhat informal, so please use the Q&A function. I'm going to start us off with asking our panelists, after I introduce them, a couple of basic questions, but I am going to monitor the QA, and I would love to have this more of a dialogue, even though we can't have all of you on the screen. Speak your voices through the Q&A, please. So with that, I'm going to introduce to you our panelists. We're still waiting for one more, but at least we have three of them here. The first is Dr. Katrine Juillard. Dr. Juillard is professor of surgery. She has an MD and her master's in public health from Hopkins. She now works at UCLA and is the Marjorie Fine Endowed Chair of Surgery there. She's also the co-director of the Program for the Advancement of Surgical Equity. We also are being graced with Dr. Ariane Christie. Dr. Christie, we were lucky enough to recruit very recently to UCLA from the University of Pittsburgh, where she finished her fellowship. Dr. Christie is now an assistant professor of surgery at UCLA and has a long history working with Dr. Juillard when she was a resident at UCSF, and spent considerable time in Cameroon that I hope speak about because this is the way to forge relationships, as Dr. Juillard had. And we also have with us today Dr. Rasheedat Oke, who earned her medical degree in Nigeria and has an MPH from the States. And we are basically nowhere without Rasheedat. She is the heart and soul, really, as a program director for the Program for the Advancement of Surgical Equity, and it is such an essential component to why Dr. Juillard and Dr. Christie are successful on the state side in academic trauma surgery, and now Rasheedat herself is one of us in the U.S. And then finally, I want to introduce to you our great colleague from Cameroon, Dr. Fanny Dissak-Delon, MD, PhD. She's the executive director of DSIGN, that I hope you're going to also have an opportunity to hear about. And DSIGN stands for Data Science Center for Surgery, Inquiry, and Equity at the University of Buea in Cameroon. She's also part of the faculty at the University of Bamenda in Cameroon. And a special thanks goes out to Fanny, where it's quite late in Cameroon, and Rasheedat, who is taking time away from her vacation right now. We really do work you quite hard, don't we, Rasheedat? Always relying on you. So thank you so much, all of you, for being here today, for I hope is a very interactive discussion. So I'll start with really all of you. I can put it out there, whomever wants to answer this. What drove you to do this type of work?
I'll go ahead and start. Thank you so much, Dr. Dicker, for your kind introduction. And I want to give a special shout out to Dr. Dissak, because there's no electricity where she is in Cameroon right now, and she somehow managed to connect. I'm not sure how. So thank you for that, Dr. Dissak. My interest in global health came before my interest in medicine. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Senegal in West Africa right after I finished my undergraduate education, and I was there from 1998 to 2001, which was really a great time to be there because it was right before globalization really hit its stride. So I had this incredible opportunity to be completely cut off from everything I knew back in the United States and very immersed into a small village in the eastern part of Senegal. And that forced me to learn the local language, make friends and family locally, and really rely on people for my emotional support. And I got to witness, for better or for worse, what it is to live in extreme poverty in that part of the world. And just seeing how fundamental health was to people's happiness, their lives, their prosperity, everything. It was such a cornerstone of the society, and it drove me to go to medical school. So that my path to trauma was by way of global health. So once I became interested in surgery and trauma surgery, I started looking at what had happened to the people around me in Senegal and other parts of Africa and what was being done. And that led me to meet my first early mentors to help guide me in how to address the issue. But that's my story, at least.
Thank you, Dr. Juillard. Dr. Christie, I'll ask you the same question, then I'll switch it up a little bit for Dr. Oke and Dr. Dissak-Delon.
Absolutely, and thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me. It's really an honor to be here. In some ways, my response echoes Dr. Juillard's in that I found trauma surgery because I was interested in global health, but I guess why I was interested in global health is that I really sort of had drunk the Kool-Aid in terms of the public health argument for why we should do this work. We work so hard and so train so long to try to save one life on a good day, maybe. And I think the capacity that this work has to impact many people is really, really powerful. If you can set up a system that is even 1% better, over the course of time, particularly with capacity building, your partners may ultimately save thousands and thousands of lives. So I was interested in doing that. I initially thought I wanted to do that in the sphere of sort of infectious disease. And I was doing projects down in Tanzania and Bolivia. And I really witnessed firsthand specifically how trauma and the lack of trauma systems has very negative impact on communities. And that led me to do a sub-internship in trauma surgery in medical school. And I think I lasted about 72 hours before I decided to make that my clinical work. So.
Thank you for that. And we'll get back to some of the early successes that Dr. Christie has had and many successes over time that Dr. Juillard has had. Dr. Dissak-Delon, you and Dr. Juillard and now Dr. Christie have worked together for quite a long time, and you have now come upon this incredible opportunity having both a U54 and a D43 together. And so tell us a little bit about what it was that was so compelling when you started to get to know Dr. Juillard and the group first at UCSF. What drove you to want to work and partner with us here?
Oh, yes. Good evening, everyone, and thank you also for the introduction. So, yes, what drove me to
Fanny?
work with you
Fanny?
also join the question. So I when a surgeon, am I muted? Can you hear me?
Yes, it might help to turn your camera off briefly, because we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you.
Okay, good. Is it better now?
That sounds very good. Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. So I was saying that so I actually wanted to do surgery when I started my medical studies, and but as Dr. Christie said, as I was doing my internships and so on, I realized that, as she said, when you are a clinical doctor, you do a great job, but you have little impact than when you do public health. So finally I said, okay, I'll do public health and so on. And like in many countries, in many African countries, focus is put in infectious disease control, malaria, and so on, but I was not really satisfied. So because like many people were there, and I started working in neglected tropical diseases. But when I met Dr. Juillard, I discovered, because I can say that before I met her, I could not imagine that there were also public health issues with surgery. So so when I met her, and we started in 2008 with the pilot study at Central Hospital in Yaoundé, and she was piloting the study, aiming at starting a trauma registry and so on. So I realized that I could match my passion for my initial passion for trauma and surgery with my new passion for public health. So this is mainly why I was really interested in meeting Dr. Juillard, and she was very encouraging, very enthusiastic, and also I discovered that I could help the field that I was interested in, that is the field of surgery. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fanny. And Katrina and Fanny, how far back do the two of you go? These relationships are so, I mean, they're really the backbone, right? So how far back did the two of you go in your work together?
2008, like Fanny said, I was a resident and I was doing my research years, and I was in Cameroon, and I was lucky enough to meet Fanny and one of her good friends, Marquise Kuongambi, who she's also was a public health physician who now works in the non-governmental sector, but they both were critical to the success of the first study we did together, and we've been working together ever since.
Working together ever since, also a really important comment about the successes. So Rasheedat, we were so lucky to have found you, or you found us. We have had a few program managers over the years, Dr. Juillard and I, and now Dr. Christie have, but there is something absolutely extraordinary about you, and we wouldn't function without you. So tell us what drew you to us when you were coming out of your Master's in Public Health school training. What was it about the Program for the Advancement of Surgical Equity that got you fired up with us?
Yeah, thank you. It's such an honor and pleasure to be on this prestigious panel amongst successful women. As long as I can remember, since I got into medical school, I wanted to do public health because I felt living in Nigeria and coming from my background, I didn't see the use of coming and putting a CT scan or a catheter lab where people are dying of malaria, where it's simple public health measures such as just giving them mosquito nets can save their lives. So I'd always wanted to go into public health. As long as even before I understood what public health was, I knew I wanted to do epidemiology and public health. And so that drove me all through. I started residency in Nigeria, and I found myself in Hopkins doing my master's in public health because I wanted to go to the #1 school of public health in the world. So it had to be Hopkins. And I guess it was just a stroke of serendipity that Dr. Juillard, who is also a Hopkins alumni, shared the list, the job ad for this program manager position with Dr. Marie Dina West. Anybody that knows MPH in Hopkins knows Dr. Marie. And when I saw the ad, I'm like, oh, this is something I can do because #1, it gives me an opportunity to do something else I like, which is implementation science, and also help build something from the scratch. It was like a nascent program that could make a difference, and it looks like I'm trying to make the difference. So I could develop it from the scratch and be a part of the chain. And at the same time, and also helping to make a change back home in Africa. I might be here in the United States after coming and not going back, but at least I'm making a difference in some way back in Africa. So that's what drew me to the program. And luckily, I interviewed with both of you, and for some reason, you liked me. So here we are.
Easy for all of us to see. So let me ask you this question, and I would love to hear from any and all of the panelists. What do you think are the most essential elements of success of partnership programs and systems development? What really are the nuggets that are most critical for success in this field?
I want to hear from Fanny and Rasheedat first about what they think.
Yeah, I can say, #1, you have to be very flexible. You shouldn't be setting your ways and say, oh, these are the rules. Global health doesn't work that way. If you are so set on, that's why sometimes we have issues with our department, or we are trying to get some things done because they're used to doing things. Things work a certain way in America, but they don't work like that back in Africa. You have to be very flexible and malleable to work with way things are working in the system. So flexibility is very important. and you have to be tenacious. I give it to Dr. Juillard. She finds opportunities in the littlest of places that I'm like, the U54 that we got, I would never, probably would have said, oh, there's no point trying to apply for it because we're not going to get it. But we applied for it and here we are. So you have to be tenacious. You have to, and you also have to be able to adapt to your context. Don't come with your own mindset of, oh, this is what they need. You need to be able to listen to the stakeholders and listen to what they want if you want your programs to succeed and if you want sustainability. I think I'll let other people provide their comments and not go on and on and on, but I can keep going on, but I'll stop at those three.
I just want to put a big highlight on that last thing that you mentioned, Rasheedat, bringing in stakeholders and making sure there's relevance and humility in any of the work that we do in public health and surgery and public health is so critical. Thank you for mentioning that. Dr. Christie?
I think Fanny's unmuted herself twice now, so I think.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Just because Dr. Juillard said, yeah, but Rasheedat said this very well, and I'm really glad to see her very passionate, and I'm not surprised because she's, as you say, really hardworking. But yes, you're right, Dr. Dicker, because what she said, the last part is very important. That is what I wanted to add. Like, yes, you have to be tenacious. You have to what I wanted to say is hardworking. I think both at this quite the same. But I wanted to say also that public health in general is also teamwork. This is the first or the main thing that one of our lecturers in Belgium told us, that most of his evaluations and whatever were like group work. You say you cannot do public health if you are not working in a group. So you have to learn to work in a group, and of course you have to be flexible and so on. And what can I say is that you have to so if we say teamwork, you have to also have I can say sharp eyes, to have your eyes open to select a good person. Like what Rasheedat said, that luckily you and Dr. Juillard had to interview her, and yes, you hired her, and you are surely not regretting. So yes, you have to have this skill, this eye, to select the good people. I also remember when we had, for example, here our field supervisor. So during the interviews, his name is Randy, and luckily for him, but not for us, he's actually in France for the rest of his career. So he was such a good person. So just also to have this good intuition to select the good people for your team, because there are a lot of people, especially in a collaboration between like, a Western country and an African country. To be honest, some people, when they will hear about Western country, I remember Dr. Juillard in the beginning was always saying that, please, I am not the global fund. This is just university fund, because when they see Dr. Juillard, USA, they just imagine that it is a version of the global fund for against malaria, tuberculosis that Dr. Juillard said. The funds are way different. So unfortunately, I think this is human. Unfortunately, that's sad, but there are some people that will only be interested on what they can gain as money inside the project. And you really need to have this to be perspicacious, to see who are the right people, because in the teamwork, if you are not with the right people, you're surely going to to have also to fail in your project, because no matter your volunteer, your hard work, your commitment, if you are surrounded with bad people, of course the project will also be hindered. That's what I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dissak-Delon. And Dr. Christie, I know you're going to be incredibly humble, but you've in your residency, you were incredibly productive in Cameroon, and got to know Fanny and others, and you already are just off to a launch pad start at UCLA in your early career. So tell us a little bit about what you already know of the essential components for success.
Thank you so much. Starting with what Fanny's saying, I was fortunate to have a lot of the right people already in place with the connections that Dr. Juillard had made. But I will say that one thing that I really want to harp on is that I don't think that you can be too humble or spend too much time kind of on the ground, because it's not a realistic expectation nor a fair one that you can come into any place. And even if you don't think you have the right ideas about things, to demand trust from people who've never seen you before, who don't know whether you're going to be there in the long run, whether anything that you're saying is true. We ask a lot of our partners. I mean, we ask a ton of our partners. Fanny is not mentioning anything, but she's been up, 2 hours away from where she lives all day in the field with one of the PACE trainees helping to start a project. We ask so much of our partners, and I think developing that trust really requires a lot of time. And I think time on the ground is really critical. You're never going to know what the situation is, where the perspectives come from. You are there initially to learn and to see, how, if any way, a partnership can help to truly support building capacity and infrastructure, and not the other way around. So, yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you. So Dr. Christie, you're closest to this, but Dr. Juillard, wasn't that long ago that you were negotiating to come to UCLA, and then before that, UCSF. So how do you successfully advocate for yourself in 2023 with a chair or another leader when looking for an academic career that would give you the time and resources to be successful in the global surgery realm? It's different than it was 10 years ago, but still, this can be a tough sell. So how do you, for lack of a better term, how do you pitch this?
I can start. And again, keep in mind that my perspective is entirely, as a early faculty member, early stage investigator coming right out of fellowship. So Dr. Juillard probably can give a little bit more of a senior, not senior, but more seasoned perspective. But I think for me, there were a lot of elements that I found helpful. Number one, you want to target your interest well. I would say if you are a new faculty hire, probably stay away from a department that really needs an enormous amount of convincing. That, is something that I know you, Dr. Dicker, and Dr. Juillard really did a lot of pioneering work doing. But there are lots of institutions in this country that are interested in either have shown prior investment or that are really growing and interested in growing a global surgery program. So I would start by targeting those beginning with that. I would also say you really should ask for help in a diverse mentorship set, like both people that are a couple of years older than you, and then investigators that have been really successful maybe in other fields. They can help you know how to market your individual strengths and weaknesses. I asked like everybody and anybody and got a lot of good advice. But I think the real key thing for me was being extremely clear and organized and granular about what I was specifically trying to do, what I brought to the table to do it, and what I planned, what actions I planned to accomplish that. So I literally developed a document that had kind of my overall career goals, my next 5-year career goals, how my background and specific projects supported those goals, or supported my ability to accomplish those goals. And then literally in a timeline, I laid out exactly what I was going to do in incredibly granular detail. I was going to go to these meetings. I was going to train these trainees. I was going to hire these people, I was going to apply for these grants. And I think that was a critical piece, because I think one of the main concerns that at least I was hearing from chairs who are interested in global surgery is that they want to see that there's going to be a return on investment and a longitudinal progression. And so what I felt my job was to really show people that I didn't have a dream, but I had a very specific plan about how to get there. And it's okay if you have weaknesses. Everyone has weaknesses. I certainly do. But I think showing how you're going to ameliorate them or correct them in your plan is really, really critical. And then at the end of the day, and I'll wrap this up because I've spoken for a long time, but at the end of the day, I always remind chairs of the following 3 things. Number 1, trainees, surgical trainees really are looking for this. They're looking for programs that have this. They are looking for mentors capable of supporting them. And that's a huge win for an institution. Number 2, the optics of global surgery are great for an institution. They are very attractive to investors. It's hard to explain why a specific protein is super critically important for people to invest in cancer, but it's really easy for even a lay person to understand why the kind of work that we do is important, and that is a benefit to them. And finally, I always remind everybody that I am a bargain compared to a basic scientist who needs a lab and $1 million piece of this equipment and $1 million piece of that equipment. So I always manage to work those things in. And with that, I'll stop my comments and let Dr.
I don't see you as a bargain though, Dr. Christie. You were a pretty tough negotiator there.
Oh, feedback. Okay, good.
So Dr. Juillard, asking you the same, but also can you talk a little bit, maybe tell a little that story about Dr. Asher's investment of how to start from the ground up and how to fund. I mean, now you're an NIH funded person with your colleagues in Cameroon, but how do you start looking for funding? How do you start from the ground up to build a program like the Center for Surgical, the program for surgical global surgery? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think as a resident, the term global surgery didn't exist when I was trying to explain to Dr. Ron Busatil, who was our chair at the time, what I was going to do for my lab years. So I started my own nonprofit to answer Dr. Davis's question back in the day and cobbled it together. I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to go to public health school. And then I raised funds through my nonprofit to fund the first trauma registry in Cameroon. And I kept that nonprofit alive for about 7 years until I was well-established faculty at UCSF and had already, gotten startup funding from Dr. Asher. So that was the first step. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough to get the first studies off the ground. I think one of the important things is I always try and keep the true north, so to speak, of what we're trying to do with our partners in mind, but then I'm very agile as to what opportunities to take a sidestep and grab to move that towards that true north. So I think one has to be very agile and get creative and start figuring out how to navigate the NIH, which is a complete alphabet soup. And I did not know how to do that. And going outside of surgery to other places for people who did global health work and were successfully funded was very helpful, because I could take my surgical mentors' guidance, those people's guidance, and put it together and try and decode the whole thing. But then when it became my turn to try and become a faculty, I was very lucky that by then trainees had started, as Dr. Christie said, wanting global surgery and public health work. So at the time, the Paul Farmer group at Harvard had started their global surgery program, and one of our prized trainees went to do her research years there. And that people at UCSF did not like. And when they said, why are they going here? We do that here. We could say, we do, but we're doing it by hook or by crook. We don't have the infrastructure that they do. And that really spoke volumes. And now at UCLA, I say, about 1 to 2 residents every year match at UCLA because of PACE. They want to come do this work with me or Dr. Dicker or Dr. Christie. They want to work on public health and equity related issues and global health issues. So it's a big draw, and that matters to our chair and to our program directors. So they're willing to help support the work with the startup funding. Finally, you want to publish. You want to check all the academic check boxes so that your bosses get the metrics that they need to show success. So getting your publications, getting your trainees funded. We've been pretty fortunate in getting them funding through different mechanisms within the UC system, within UCLA, and some extramural funding as well. Foundation funding, society funding, things like that. We have to get creative and take a lot of shots on goal. And then finally getting your own federal funding, I think, was the thing that really sealed the deal. Once I got my first NIH grant, it was like everyone left me alone. It was like magical. Everyone's like, oh, you're NIH funded. It's this funny thing. You're the same person, but somehow people take you seriously. So that was a big game changer. And we've been really lucky to get these last few bigger grants that have changed the landscape for us in Cameroon and what we're able to do, and how the opportunities for our trainees, for our partners, the training, the science, all of it. So it started with not a lot of money, which actually was probably a good thing in a lot of ways. We were really efficient. I got to meet people like Fanny, Fanny is one of the most engaged and motivated scientists I know. And so that was a huge gift to be able to meet her. My partner, Dr. Shishom, who's a surgeon in Cameroon. I don't know how he gets everything done that he gets done, but he is truly motivated because of the science and his vision and his belief that anybody he knows could get in a car crash in Cameroon, and he wants them to be able to get good care. That's why he does this. So that starting small is actually a blessing in disguise a lot of the times, because you create those relationships that are the key foundation for all of this work.
And I'm going to just add to that. It was also a really huge selling point to retain you when you were done with your fellowship at UCSF for Nancy Asher to invest in the Center for Global Surgical Studies. Was a way of retaining you, although it didn't last all that long because then UCLA grabbed you. But to have investment from the chair, and again, using it for not only retention, but also for recruitment of really good trainees, and being able to offer opportunities like Dr. Christie had to spend her research years building those relationships in Cameroon. That was a really big deal. And so that's just one form of many of the investments that you mentioned. And I just want to quickly follow up, Katrine. Dr. Davis also asked the question about which NIH institutes in particular are interested in.
Yeah, I mean, so the one that everyone thinks about is Fogarty, and I'm not the guru of the NIH. I've learned a lot from my mentors and from talking to the program officers. And the tips I would say are this. First of all, the Fogarty has a lot of like-minded individuals who are very interested in funding global health work, but their initiatives, they're one of the least well-funded, they're a center, not an institute, but entities in the NIH. And they often have to partner with other institutes and NIH to do the larger grants. They'll do smaller ones like R21s on their own, but for the D43s, for the RO1s, they do for head injury. They have brain injury is one of the ones that they do have an RO1 for. They partner with several of the other institutes. So I've learned slowly that a lot of these other institutes, like heart, lung, blood, they have their own internal global health group within that. You can't really, I couldn't figure that out from the internet, but I heard about it, and I found out through our program officers, and having conversations with the program officers and networking that way has been super helpful. The same thing for the National Cancer Institute. They have some global surgery investment as well. So a lot of these institutes, and there isn't an Institute of Trauma, and I'm so grateful for the people who are trying to make that happen because it's a huge deficit. But in the meantime, a lot of these other institutes, you can kind of figure out who has been partnering with Fogarty on all these grants to make the bigger grants happen. And they often have like a smaller center or program within their institute that has global health missions. So that was something that I didn't know until I started looking, and that's been really helpful for us in figuring out how to strategize and look towards future funding.
Thank you for that. That was really comprehensive. Appreciate that. I want to get into one snippet, really a detail of both the Center for Global Surgical Studies at UCSF that we had, but also at PACE, we've built it out a lot. And that is a guide for learners and, frankly, faculty for conduct and expectations of when people do travel. And so I would love to really start with Dr. Dissak-Delon. When you receive somebody from UCLA, whether it's a medical student, a resident, a junior faculty, what would you consider as far as your expectations of that person, and how would they best serve the mission when we deliver them to you, whether they're there for a couple months or longer?
Thank you. So yes, when I receive somebody from UCLA, clearly my main focus is their objectives, because when people travel for a so long distance, you know, they clearly have objectives, right? So my focus or my satisfaction would be if they successfully do what they came here to do. So when I discuss with the person, I say, what are your objectives? And what I really appreciate is that, as Dr. Christie just said, when they come with their objectives, they have one question: what do you think about the objectives? Like concerning the Cameroon context, are they contextual? Are they actual? So we work together to be sure that their objectives and their expectations match the Cameroon context. But I have no other expectation than to be sure that they fulfill their objectives, because and I'm always grateful, because so far all the people that came here has the same energy, has the same has the same commitment like what Dr. Christie had when she came here in Cameroon in 2015. So they are very incredible people, great people, and as she said, humble people, because it was very rare for me, because before working with Dr. Juillard, or while I was working with Dr. Juillard, I was also working at the Ministry of Public Health level. I've been working as public health officer there for like 13 years. And to be honest, usually when we receive people from abroad, they have their own objective, but they don't want to see or to learn about us. They don't want to be sure that it is adapted to our context. So they don't listen to us enough. So that is what I appreciate when people come, and I encourage, when you go somewhere, I think somebody said that, maybe it was Dr. Christie. So when you go somewhere, you have to be open to their own realities, and you have to be sure that your expectation, and you need to have that flexibility. That's what Dr. Oke said, to be flexible, knowing that you are going to another reality that is maybe different from your reality, and then you adapt to your objectives and so on. And most often of time, we are not even far from their initial objectives, just that we adjusted it according to our context. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Fanny. And now Ariane, but Katrina and I over the years have, essentially screened people, didn't, interview people with the guarantee that they were going to travel to Uganda or Cameroon to do this particular, blood acquisition study or whatever it was. We actually do some interviewing, and then we turn them over to Rasheedat. So Rasheedat, how do you get our trainees ready? How do you know? Because you don't shy away from letting us know if you have concerns. So how do you get people ready, and what are the things that you face with American trainees and faculty when considering we're sending them overseas?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is the person's safety. We want to be sure that we send you in one piece, you come back in one piece. So you need to fulfill all the university guidelines, because most institutions have travel guidelines when you're traveling. You have to take the vaccinations, you have to do register with the United States Embassy, and just the basic things. Then we also try to educate them and like give them some type of what to expect, even though like try to guide their expectations. Oh, you're going for a 6 weeks project in Cameroon. Don't expect by the time you come back, you're going to have a paper done. You're going to, because in the 6 weeks, you might not even be able to get your IRB approved. We just try to set expectations. Then we also try to let them know that the world, like you as a UCLA medical student, the world you're going to in Cameroon is totally different. You've had medical students that are gonna like, oh, where in our toilets didn't have seat covers. I'm like, you even have a toilet, not even seat covers. So it's good. We try to set their expectations, even though for some of them, when they get there, it's really an eye opener. Some of them are so passionate on phone calls and they're crying, and when they see people on the floors and EDs and stuff like that. But we try to set expectations and tell them to make sure their context appropriate. You don't want to go there with an air of authority, like I know better than you, or with the white savior complex or anything, but just make sure you adapt yourself to the local guidelines and make sure you do everything that's you don't want to, like Dr. Juillard has said, I think in Uganda, you have to talk gently, but in Cameroon, you might have to increase your volume a little bit more. So just make sure that you learn the culture, and most of the things you might even get done, you might get it done over dinner, it might not even be in the person's office. So we just try to set expectations like, okay, this is a totally different world you're going to, but if you keep at it, you will get something done. Little wins over time, you get something done. So I think most of it is setting expectations. And we've had a couple of different experiences, and most of them come back. Even if they use 6 weeks or they use 1 year, we always make sure, Dr. Juillard's priority is always making sure that they get something out of it. So most of our trainings end up with at least 1 or 2 first author publications, and something always comes out of it. So it's been so far so good.
And it can be a full-time job. I recall, Katrina, you'll probably remember this. I was in the middle of the night. I was doing an appy, and one of the vice deans for the School of Medicine texted me and said that they couldn't find one of the medical students who we had sent to Soroti, Uganda, and he ended up being fine. He just didn't feel good, and he went to a friend's house. But there were about 4 hours of minor panic in the middle of the night trying to locate this individual. So it can be a full-time job at times. Any other comments? Yeah.
I was going to say, I think the award for the trainee who faced the most unpredictable circumstances goes to Dr. Christie when she was a resident. And she did, I'll let her tell the story, but essentially she designed, it took a lot of time to get this all organized and design a community-based survey for a whole region of Cameroon, which is like a huge logistical beast of a project. Fanny, you're nodding your head because and you have to do these with a short time of data collection for the results to be valid. So she had picked 8 weeks and they launched it. She had like a team of 7 students, another from Buya, another medical student, and halfway through their data collection, there was some civil unrest that broke out, and there was a whole shutdown kind of COVID style quarantine situation that happened. But Ariane, you want to talk a little bit about how you navigated that? Because that was another one where there was a series of phone calls with leadership from multiple institutions to figure out how to handle it.
That is absolutely true. And I have to give credit to you and Dr. Dicker. I always say, you're my mentors, and you're the people that I call at 2 in the morning in the middle of a mild civil crisis in Africa, because it's true. But yeah, no, it was a huge learning experience for me, for sure. And I think I want to harp back to what everyone's been saying about flexibility, and flexibility really in terms of it also in realizing that your conceptions of what is okay and not okay may not match the context or the partners. And so finding where that safety boundary was kind of an ongoing discussion that took some time to make sure everybody was comfortable, that we were doing things that were safe, but also that were appropriate to the context truly, and navigating that was something that I wouldn't have been able to do without, you know, our Dr. Shishom, Dr. Dissak, kind of guiding the way really on a day-by-day basis. But I am happy to report that, you know, over a period of I think we were paused for a couple of weeks, which seemed like a very big deal at the time in the middle of this 8-week very tight time frame. But we really kind of all worked together to figure out a plan that was certainly an adaptation of what we had wanted to do originally, and involved about like a 4-hour round trip transit every day. But we were able to complete the work, which I think was really important for our partners as well. You know, these medical students, I truly were heroes. I mean, they were writing kind of their thesis based on this project. And while, you know, we might be sad that a project wasn't successful or didn't go through, I mean, their MD degrees hinged on this. And it was very important for us to make sure that we were able to safely kind of deliver them to the end of that. And they're all longtime doctors now, and many of them still work with us. So very happy collaborative success in the finish.
Dr. Christie mentored those students, and most of them have a first author publication that came from that same data collection exercise. And every one of them, we have to write in the limitations that there was a disruption in data collection. There's some minor civil unrest, which is always fun for the
not the typical limitation that you put in your papers. But and you brought up a good point. So, and I would encourage any of you to look up these manuscripts on community-based survey. It's just such an exceptional job, Dr. Christie and Dr. Juillard and Dr. Dissak-Delon. It also brings up the point, and then we'll get to Dr. Davis's question there. You kind of answered it, but we'll get to that. But the importance of co-authorship, I just wanted to just echo that, and how critical it is for first authorship, meaningful authorship from our partners in whatever country we're partnering with. It's just absolutely essential. There's no question about it. It brings relevance to the whole manuscript. Dr. Davis is asking, what are the bailouts if individuals need to leave due to civil unrest or other issues that matter? And how common is it that people need to be pulled?
We've actually never had to pull somebody, and this particular instance that Dr. Christie went through was it was unusual, and it was isolated to one part of the country because Cameroon is both a French-speaking and English-speaking country, and the Anglophone and Francophone heritage has caused some issues. And her study took place in one of the two Anglophone regions that has their disagreements with the mostly Francophone central government. So that was limited to that part of the country. And we basically every year talk to our global health program leaders at UCLA who are with the School of Medicine, who oversee a lot of this, especially medical student activities related to global health and have deployment and other procedures they go through, and just assess based on what our partners have been experiencing and seeing there, the safety. And so far, we've just decided not to house people in that region. We put them in Douala or Yaoundé or another place that's outside of that region. And we have, because our program is so big, we have staff in 10 hospitals in the country. So we do have people almost all over the place that our trainees can work with. So we've been okay. I don't remember ever having to pull anybody. Do you, Dr. Dicker or Dr. Christie? I don't think we ever have.
No, I think my situation was the closest, and we wouldn't have hesitated to do it if that became needed, and we discussed it for sure. But you know, we were able to do it in a way that was safe.
I think the biggest thing was getting reassurance. Ariane, you and I got reassurance from partners, and when and Katrine had as well from partners in Cameroon who really had that reality check. And then I think the hardest part then felt like really convincing the program director at UCSF to let you stay. Because getting experience, and again, you know, it's all contingent upon strong relationships, understanding if you do have an issue where people are going to go. Katrina and I have physically seen the space we utilize for our learners in Soroti, Uganda, you know, knowing it to that extent and having these trusting relationships with partners is really critical.
I think that's also a really good point, Dr. Dicker, is that, you know, often what gets reported in our news and the world news is not always the same. And what's on the ground really happening versus what gets sensationalized, I think is hard to untangle sometimes. So again, having those long-term relationships was really essential to help us navigate this particular situation.
I don't see anything else in the chat, so I'm going to ask the rest of the panel to ask questions of each other.
I can start. So I have a question for Dr. Dissak, which is what things, what either resources or what relationships have really allowed your work to be easier? Like, what things do we ask of you that have been very challenging for you? And is there anything that we have done anything that any of these programs have done to really support you that you would recommend other programs put in place? I don't know if that question makes sense, but.
Okay, thank you as for the question. And the program itself, as you said, there are some requirements that are challenging. Like, for example, if we have to, like recently we have this survey that we are doing in Limbe, as you said, which is normally far from my hometown, and I have to travel. So those are kind of challenges that are inherent to the objectives, to the job. But to be honest, I really find that besides the scientific and the work experience, we also have a human experience. When Dr. Juillard was talking now even about the students, I wanted to say that what she doesn't mention is that aside from the scientific objectives of even the fellows that come here in Cameroon, she always say that for one day or for one weekend, forget about your objective, forget about your manuscript and so on, and go and see people, you see, have this human experience. So the two things that I can say that I appreciated with the approach of Dr. Juillard and all the team working with us is this, especially the gender approach, because Dr. Juillard is very gender focused, and which is really, really a good thing here especially in Africa, to encourage women without putting men aside. That is sure, Professor Shisham is not a woman, but yes, this woman approach. And also, you said something very important here, that we are not perfect. We cannot be perfect. So I think it's a human approach. You allow your partner to do errors, and you say, okay, that's not a big deal. At times you can do something that is wrong. You apologize. You're like, very, very sorry. And your partner say, oh, it's not a big deal. It's true that it's an error, but it's not a big deal. And also this is what I learned, that you can have a partner that is weak, that can make errors. The first approach is not just to accompany the person. So your first reflection is not the person is dumb and I did an error by selecting the person. No, you say that, okay, based on my first opinion, maybe there's a problem. You assess what is the problem and you accompany the person. So that is the thing that I can say. So gender approach, and also the human approach of work, that we are not like robots. We are also human. We can understand that you have weaknesses. And when you are working with somebody who understands that you are weak, you have weaknesses, this encourages you to acknowledge your weaknesses and to work on them, because you don't want to, to take profit of the kindness of your partner, of your boss, because she's actually my boss. Okay, thank you.
It's lovely, Fanny. Thank you. Does anybody want to field Dr. Davis's 17th question? Just kidding. What do you wish? Oh, there's another one too. Oh, there's several more. What do you wish you had known as you started your global surgery journey? But perhaps if you don't mind, Dr. Davis, we can check in with a couple of others. So we have, I'm so impressed by how you all have maintained such a long partnership, given government and nonprofit team turnover can derail projects, programs. How have you all persisted or found ways to keep stability in your partnership? Have you ever had to start a project from scratch?
This whole project was started from scratch. I like showed up as a resident in 2008 and spent a lot of time at the Ministry of Public Health, sitting in various people's offices trying to make friends. I mean, I spent the first 6 months on the ground not doing any science because my IRB hadn't gone through. But anyway, so the whole thing was started from scratch. But I will say we got very lucky in that some of our main partners were promoted in the Ministry of Public Health. And while they were too busy to maintain active research collaborations with us, they were able to help us facilitate things when we hit bureaucratic bottlenecks. And that was really critical. But the other thing is, I think and I was actually recently on a panel with some other global health people, and this was something they also emphasized. When you find your local partners who are like-minded, in it for the right reasons, and willing to do this with you, often you will find that the key people who have been able to be successful in this environment are very diplomatic and politically savvy people. So I can say that of some of our main partners are very aware of the landscape and are very good at sensing when things might go wrong, figuring out plan B, front running plan B, and so that kind of conversation has to happen now and then between the top the PIs on a project, and really try and making sure that you understand how things could go south in a complicated, I mean, it's humankind. I mean, we are all complicated people just on our own, and then you put us all together in an organizational structure, and it's, we all know that happens at our own institutions and other places. But I think finding the local, that has to be a key characteristic of your local partner champion, I think, is being able to navigate these things with you, because we can't do it as outsiders. We just can't.
Thank you. Great wisdom. In 30 seconds, I just want to mention one quick thing on Dr. Davis's comment, because it's actually a hard question, and I would say, what do you wish you had known as you started your global surgery journey? I still have angst about the fact that I went to Sri Lanka in 2005, right after the tsunami. I have angst about it because I felt like I was doing something good, and I was actually a burden. I utilized transport, I utilized food, I utilized a bed for 2 weeks in a country that was devastated from the tsunami. And so I learned a lot, but I feel like I feel like I injured the community by doing that. So when you go into something, it has to be eyes wide open. It really has to be in partnership. Encouragement here. Hopefully you heard from everybody about systems and science, and true partnership and relationship building, because that's not what I did in 2005. So I wish I had learned that without feeling like I caused a burden to the community that I went to in good spirit to try to help. But always know what you're getting yourself into. We haven't been talking at all about medical mission type work here, but particularly in that context, make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. Let's see if there are any final comments here. What advice do you have for surgical residents coming from a more community style residency program? And I know we only have 1 minute, but maybe we can put that out there, with less support and resources to assist in global surgery and global health research.
I can jump into that. So I would say, go to the meetings, go talk to mentors at different programs, talk to us. I think that increasingly the the connections and the mentorship structure is across institutions, that's considered to be a strength, not a weakness. And so look for mentorship maybe outside of your own program to start, and we can help you do that. And if anyone wants to contact us, I'm sure any of us would be happy to talk to you about it.
That is a great last message. I know several people here, including Melanie, who was in the QA there, have sat in on our program for the Advancement of Surgical Equity meetings, and we can certainly get you that link through the AAST, through WITS. Email me if you already have my email. Happy to connect you so that you don't feel alone out there, no matter what program you're coming from. So with that, I want to thank my panelists. I'm so proud of this group, extraordinary team of people, and it's been a pleasure chatting with you all, and thank you all for being here and asking your questions, and please do follow up if you have more interest and more comments. Have a good afternoon, evening, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.